Good evening. I'm Leah Crowley, and I'm chairing the Buildings and Grounds Committee. We are going to start tonight with several discussion items, and the first one is the 2016 bond update.
Good afternoon, Chair Crowley, members of the board, and Superintendent McManus. All right, so to begin, wanted to talk about where we stand today with 2016 board, bond updates. We've had two Board of Education workshops over the summer to kind of go into some deep dives and details of the in and outs of the projects. We discussed in those times financial statuses of completed projects to date. We also discussed forecasted project costs for the remainder of the work, and the biggest takeaway was we're forecasting in a worst case scenario that we're about $63.5 million at a shortfall, and that's a potential. That's not something that we know is true, but that's something that we were projecting at the time. We also went through a reevaluation of remaining projects, more specifically Griffith Elementary School, Ward Elementary School, and the new Smith Farm Middle School. We discussed the options for postponing those projects for a future bond, with the reasonings being the needs for those projects have diminished since we imagined those in 2015. And then it also helps to resolve, obviously, the anticipated shortfall, should that be a real case. We also had a discussion around File Bills project in specifics related to the cost implications with the most recent design. We discussed the three different options that the board can consider for how we move forward with that project. According to the slide, the first option is being the redesign of that project using the current bond program for that school. The second option listed up there is being continued with the current design that we have a bid for. And then obviously the last option we're considering, or that the board has been considering, is redesign as a new school. All three of those have their own ins and outs as to schedule impacts and cost impacts. But the biggest takeaway is to consider that option 2 and option 3 in our worst case scenario would potentially have an impact on the remaining school projects, specifically East Forsyth High School. Again, if those projected costs were to become real. So next steps and timeline for this item. Obviously, we need to get some direction from the board on how we need to proceed with the three projects we discussed as far as postponing Griffith, Ward, and Smith Farm. With that, we would do a letter to the county commissioners and have a few briefings before they would approve that, and we can then reallocate those funds for those projects to the specific ones we saw might be a problem in the future. We'd also appreciate some decision on direction for File Bill and considering those three options that we've discussed over those last two workshop meetings. And then I did want to leave this out there for the group to consider. I don't know how much I voiced this to all the members, but we do have two projects in our 2016 bond program that we've applied for the needs-based school construction loan, or grant, through the DPI's NC lottery. So those applications went in just before September 1st. And we do not know when we're going to hear back about approvals or any indication on those applications, but the two projects that were related to the bond that are a benefit for our bottom line are Bronson and East Forsyth High School. So we applied both of those projects for that grant funding to help offset some of these issues we're experiencing, or we project to be experiencing. Are there any questions? Yes.
I think it would be a great idea. I think we talked about this a little bit about having some community meetings to talk about, just sort of to educate the public about a little bit more about what is going on and sort of get some of their ideas.
Yeah, sure. So just real quick, we are posting an article, I think, on the web tonight with some abilities to gather community input. And I think Superintendent McManus has some other things that she might want to add.
We had talked, and actually, Board Member Jones, when we were visiting one of the school sites, had mentioned the idea about community meetings. So we had talked about that. The posting is one way to reach everyone. So that's one thing we want, like everyone can get online and write. We can add community meetings. We could add them in the evening. We just need, if that is what we want to do, we just need to talk through what we're going to share each one and where we need to have them. Because we just need to talk the logistics of that. But we're very open to doing those. Right now, we could do both options, or we can just do the posting. So we're open to either. We're open to all of the above, if that would be beneficial. I think that being able to describe the data around Griffith, Ward, and Smith Farm in those prospective areas, I think would be important. We'd love to collaborate on direction on what more besides sharing with them the data. I mean, if they are to say, well, we just need to talk through what that feedback conversation is going to look like. Is it an education? Is it a feedback? Is it a two-way? Or is it, I think that's really important. But we're willing to do that for sure.
So I have concerns around changing the scope of what we took to the voters, and I understand, and that mainly is around huge change of scope for 5.0, and also trying to when this bond happened in 2016 and you go from 2016 all the way to 2022 and into 2023 and beyond, no one could have imagined in our crystal ball the cost that would go up. We would have gone through a pandemic. I mean, just everything that happened. So I think people are reasonable, and the voters made this happen. It's the only bond that has passed in every precinct across the entire county. I just want to make sure that we keep the lines of communication open with our voters so that they understand, one, where the data shows that right now maybe these pre-K centers and things like that can be postponed and re-looked at, and then also that we, fulfill our promise. I feel like that we could finish the Philo project and do the East project as we had promised to the voters if we kept with the scope of the bond, which would be significant for Philo. I think both projects are warranted. It's what we went out and talked to people about. I know earlier today, probably hadn't had a chance to look at it, but I found some documents where, we went very specifically about how this bond would affect each community. Talking about it at football games, announcing it from the stands, meeting with every group that would meet with a board member to talk about it. And I just don't want people to feel like the next time a bond comes around that they say, hey, remember they didn't do these projects, and they don't feel like they know the why. Because it's not just about finishing this, but it's also about making sure that we continue to have this great support from our people in the county. So I would like some type of maybe back and forth, a little bit of to hear from the public in whatever way the majority of the board feels that we can do that. But it seems so much like here in a committee meeting, people can't ask us questions, and I guess them having the opportunity to maybe ask some of those questions would make the process be very transparent.
So I would just like to support the ask of the chair, Ms. Kaplan, and also Board Member Jones to reach out to the community to provide discussion around any adjustments that may come to the 2016 bond. That was the one point. The second point, and this may be a question. Oh, also I wanted to thank Carolyn Highsmith for sending information about Philo Hill. She sent a very strong some strong information for us to consider based on historical context. So I wanted to thank her for that. But this may be a question for Darrell Walker as it relates to, at one point, we were thinking about with the state grant, possibly some funds going to build Ashley. And so now that there's conversation around some grant dollars going to kind of offset whatever costs based on what is actually on the 2016 bond for construction. I just want to get clarity of what happened with, that conversation.
Ms. Woodbury, I can speak to that too. We actually did apply for the Ashley School as well. I was more only mentioning Bronson and East Forsyth just because those were related to the bottom line. If we got money for Ashley, it wouldn't really affect the bottom line for the entire project.
Oh,
Program bond.
So I know later on, we're talking about spending some funds, some savings from some bond projects. Maybe we're looking at that for the next line item, which is the increase for Bronson. How much do we have in those savings that can be allocated to finish up some of these other projects? I mean, is it a huge amount of money? I mean, we're talking several million, or we're just a little bit?
Yeah. So that's not, if you remember back in June when we showed the breakdown of where we are construction-wise with our completed projects, that I think there was about 11 or 12 projects that we've completed so far. We're actually still in the red when you do all the math and add up all the overages of each project. But in the projects themselves, there's some surplus. And I hate to call it savings because it's not really savings. It's all going back to try to feed the beast of all the bottom line of our projected overages and things that we have for what's left in the bond. But there are projects that we've yet to close out that have some surpluses in them that I would use to reallocate those funds to the Bronson design change order that we'll talk about here in a second.
Okay, so just help me. So if we're still in the red.
Yep.
But we have some surplus.
Yeah, and individual projects. So it's more of an accounting move to get the money that's in surplus from those projects that are completed to projects that are in need of additional funding.
Marilyn?
The grants that we have applied for, who's the decision-making body on those grants?
NCDPI.
Okay, is there any way we can
Yes.
lobby help for that? What can the community do as well as we afford?
So I think you can reach out to your representatives at the state level and let them know that you're interested in those applications being awarded. Everybody has a voice, right? So we need to promote that more than I have actually. So let's actually get that out there for folks to do.
Yeah, can we put that with the information that we're putting out on the web or whatever we're putting out with the public comment or whatever? We can include that. I think that's important.
I'm sure we can.
And I guess with that being said, the project, so Bronson East, you said Ashley, you put out there.
Correct.
And if I were on the committee, do we put in the application? I mean, do they see that these are also things that we're in a bond project? So would that hurt I'm trying to understand, if the voters in the county have already increased their tax base to put this in a bond, what's the rubric, I guess? Yeah. What I'm saying is I don't want us to think, oh yeah, we're gonna get that approved, because would that look like, this group's already, they've already allocated the money for it, why are you asking for that? So I'm trying to understand that. Mr. Walker.
What is allocated, is it gonna cover it?
Right, and I guess I'm just trying to figure out, what did we apply for? I mean, we've applied for many of these bonds, and how many have we gotten?
Yeah, so we didn't make the first round.
Right.
There is, on our part, there was a 35% match.
Okay.
Which is why we chose some of the projects we did, because we already had money in the game. I think we've got a pretty good shot. There's going to be at least two more issuance after the original one. I think the second one's going to probably be in the November, December timeline, with another one potentially in the spring. I feel really confident somewhere along the way. The goal on the call was for every school district that makes an application to get something. And they started out, they released 400 million in the first round. Most of those went to Eastern North Carolina and Western North Carolina. And so I really feel like they're going to fill in the gap. And I really think we got a good shot, at least over the next two. And the goal for the DPI is to do this every year. So what they did is, you may recall, when they originally started the lottery, they subsidized lottery money into the original, to the state budget to offset costs. Now they've lowered that percentage that's going into the day-to-day budget and pulling money out for schools for capital and construction. So that's why all this money's being freed up all of a sudden. And so I think if that percentage stays as it is, this will be an ongoing opportunity for districts.
Great. Alex, you have a question?
Thank you. So I had, and I'll be brief with this. This is just around the conversations with the community. I think that number one, what's important to me, I think first and foremost, is that the district has a sort of, in kind of going through everything, has an opinion about, sort of a recommendation about how to proceed. I get that you kind of want to leave these things up to us to kind of give you some guidance about, and I know that these topics are very, because of different sections of the community, people feel some kind of way about these different projects. But what would help me as a board member is if the sort of district had a definitive recommendation around these things. The reason why is because you all as staff have to execute this. You all have to make this work. And it is just like our responsibility as a sort of fiduciary body, you all's responsibility is to do what is best for the district. And so I'm going to place a whole lot of weight on that. I think that relative to these community meetings, what might be good is to kind of scope out options for people. So this is what our recommendation is as a district, but we also can do these things over here, just so that we're not showing up to things and just having people be like, well, what about this project that has nothing to do with any of these wrong things? I think that that's important. And the reason why I'm saying this is because it's important that this sort of be data driven. And I know that there are lots of opinions about these dollars. I think personally, because of what we've experienced over the past couple of years, I don't necessarily see it as beyond the realm of possibility that priorities shift, because everybody's priorities have shifted. I mean, I think that from a financial standpoint, the cost of everything has increased. I just think we have to be really clear about what our needs are and what we would like to do with these dollars and what is best in terms of the spending for the district. Because that may not necessarily be, while we have to sort of balance, I think, the desire to get future bonds passed or make sure that people's opinions are respected, I think that at the end of the day, the decision has to be what is best for the district. So I'll just say that and I'll leave it there.
Any other comments?
Well, very well stated, Alex, and I agree. I think it would be really good to have us clear. This is what we believe from senior staff and the superintendent, that this is the direction we think is best for our district.
All right, let's go on to the Bronson design change order.
Okay, second item for discussion here is the Bronson Elementary School Design Services change order. I guess the biggest takeaways from this item are we had a contracted scope for 2017 contract with Walter Rouse, Callahan Pierce to perform schematic design, design development, construction documents, bidding services, construction administration, and project closeout for the Bronson Elementary School project. In that contract, we had some, initially we had some expectations of where we were going to place Bronson. We had two options, I think, to consider to begin with back in 2017. And long story short, those options did not work out for that school. So we had to, reimagine again where we're going to be placing Bronson within their zone. Through that process, we initially started discussion with Walter Robs to have them perform their initial stages of schematic design. Through that process, they started helping us with site selection, and then as we lost the two options that we had initially, considering, we expanded our options and casted a wider net for site options, and we continued down the path with Walter Robs and helping with site analysis. That's unfortunately where my expertise and knowledge and background end with that case, but the change order being requested today from the designer is twofold. There's a capacity or portion of the change, $504,000, that's related to the site analysis options that they did for us for trying to select a site in Bronson, and they were ultimately a big player in helping us decide on the 12th and Patterson site. And the other component is some annual percentage increases for their cost of their employees over time. If you look back, the original intent of the contract with Walter Robs, Callahan & Pierce was meant to only be about a 3 to 4 year long process. Well, we spent that and a little bit more in just the site selection process. So we still have another year's worth of design for Bronson to get completed. And that's the result of those additional funds being requested today. I'm sorry.
So how has the scope changed from the original contract? Because to me, once you sign a contract, it's about doing that job. And, I know there's things that can make it take longer, but they haven't had to do, construction plans if they don't have a final design. So they haven't put that time. I know the years have gone by, but they haven't had to put in daily hours or paying somebody to do all these drawings that we don't have because we hadn't. So what scope changes occurred since the original contract was signed to merit $500,000?
Well, it's only, I say only, it's $269,000 is what they're requesting for the site analysis portion. So in that scope change,
Could you go back to the slide?
I will. This helps me, I guess, explain where the scope changes were and what Walter Robs had performed for the last 4 or 5 years in this analysis. So in this last 4 or 5 years, they visited and evaluated the various sites throughout Bronson's attendance zone. And at one point in time, we had 20 sites that we were considering for Bronson's location. They also developed a lot of test fit plans for each site that we were looking at to see if we could actually fit schools on these locations. They reviewed and developed various schemes to combine Cook and Bronson, because that was another option we were looking at during the whole analysis. And then they also provided site layout information for the construction manager, Gilvain, to evaluate cost options for the various sites. So while they weren't developing like hard and fast designs, they were doing a lot of concepts and schematic-esque type work to help land one of those sites as a good option.
And that wasn't part of the original contract?
It was not. It was not, because like I said, we had thought we were going to land on 2 particular sites, and we were just going to pick and choose from the 2. But after further evaluation on one, and then we had a renegotiation of a deal on the other that went south for the district, so we had to punt.
I mean, I remember 3 or 4 things that they were brought into, and they had to spend some of their time seeing if it was even feasible. And they did all that. I kind of just wish it's just seeing the changeover all at once. I'm sure if we would have seen it in smaller increments, I know that they did the work. I mean, there was even they even met with us over at the Bronson site to see if building at Bronson would be an option. And then when land fell through, they had to punt. So You know, I'm sure they have done this probably and beyond, and honestly, I understand why they're asking for an increase, just because it's gone on so long. So I think that that's fair. They've always been good partners to the district, and I would say probably have put some extra things in that they probably hadn't billed us for. This has been a ping pong ball for sure. But so back to the how we're gonna pay for it. So it confuses me because I think of, we're in the red, but we have a surplus. So explain to me, you know, because if we're in the red, we don't have the money. So we're saying these overall.
So, yeah.
I just tell me how much we have in surplus and what we're taking that out. Because if we have a surplus, then we're not in the red.
Well, obviously, yeah, I agree. I understand where you're coming from. It's, yeah, I'm sorry if I'm giving more confusion than help here, but we obviously have not spent all of our money in the $350 million for the bond, right? So these projections that we're doing on these remaining projects are just that. They're projections, they're estimates, they're not quotes, they're not, you know, they're not 100% concrete, you know. So the balance of what money we have is actually still in the county's control. Like, we haven't sold, I think it's 87 and a half, we still haven't sold. So we still have money to spend. We're not in the red per se, but if you look at the projects that we have remaining and the projections that we have to do to get those projects across the finish line, then you can draw the conclusion that we don't have funds available. But for now, we do have projects that have some surplus in them that we can reallocate to serve this need for this one project at this particular time.
So when you say we have surplus in the project, so of the projects that we have already completed and closed out, there's a savings there
Yes.
from what we estimated in the actual line items.
Well, yeah, looking back.
We used some of that already. So that's why I was saying, just how much is there? I
To
think
quote a number, I can't quote a number right now, but I can tell you there's money left in our pre-K additions project. There's money left in our Lawrence Paisley project that's been completed. There's money left in our pedestrian and traffic projects. And then we have some money left in our maintenance and capital funds as well, but I kind of try to disregard that because I don't know how that money is tracking all the time.
because maintenance and capital, that was the $22 million in the bond. We haven't completed that, right?
Correct, no.
Okay. So so if we were saying there was really surplus, it would be for the projects that we've already closed out. So I mean, I would like to know what that number is.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
So they did do some detailed, I mean, it was very helpful to me when we would go to those numerous sites to see the pros and cons of each of those. So I know that they did do some extra things. I would agree with Ms. Jones in the fact that they did go above and beyond what they signed on for. And so I, you know, even though it would have been kind of nice to have like little bills come in along the way and not this big number, which kind of glares, but they did do the work, and I would agree with that. And you know, unfortunately, it's coming at a time whenever any number looks big and you know, honest to us. So you know.
I agree.
As hard as a pill as it is to swallow, it's one that you need, so.
That's right.
Any other questions? Okay, we're gonna go to the
Thank you.
facilities audit. Thank you. We're gonna go to the facilities audit timeline update with Mr. Walker.
Thank you. We've had a little bit of discussion about this in the past. I think we can get through these next couple items pretty quickly. Right now, we have collected all the data on the outside of all of our campuses and the inside of our school buildings. The last date is projected to be November 18th. So they're going to use the month of December to compile all the information, and then we'll have your final report right after the first of the year. But they're on a pretty tight schedule to get there.
My biggest concern with January is that we will have a board that has basically been sworn in, and that is the extent of their experience, and then being presented with the outcome of the facilities update is a very big swallow to present at a first or second meeting of the board. And my recommendation is if there's any way to give even something preliminary, I'm very anxious about the idea of having the first thing that the new board sees is a facilities audit, but that is my concern.
I don't see a problem with it unless they had to have a act on it, exactly. But seeing that, I think it's actually a great way to train a new board on what their responsibilities are and what all is involved. And a lot of it is about facilities and bonds and limited resources.
Well, I think the other thing was we probably only have one meeting in November and one meeting in December. So the timeline really kind of got crunched about getting everything together, if I recall.
And we can't really get that information any sooner if they haven't finished gathering all the data.
I'm not sure, but we'll work towards that as quick as we possibly can. You got 2 in November? Okay.
Yes, and then that will be the end of the sitting board.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll see
We'll
what,
still be collecting data in November.
yeah, at least through the 18th.
Analyzing.
Yeah, at least through the 18th.
Right.
You know, we may be able to come back and share what's on the outside part piece or some parcel of it or something, but we'll talk with them about that.
Yeah, but I think Mr. Crowley brings up a valid point. You know, it's probably a good thing to start off to really see, all the needs that are there, much like, it would have been great to have this facilities audit looking in hindsight in 2015 when we were pretty much a new board trying to put a bond together. So I think it'll be great for them to have that information, right out of the gate. So probably good timing if this board can't see it, but good for a new board to see right up front.
Okay, any other questions about the facilities audit timeline? All right, let's move on to the Ashley properties.
Yeah, the Ashley property, we've had some discussion about the process as we continue to acquire that. We're at a point now to ready to make notification of this, and in order to do that, we had to have a formal board action. So that's why this is coming before you tonight as a formal vote to us to be able to turn that document at that point, the minutes over to the attorneys to move forward on the actions.
Any questions? All right, do we have time to do the 2/3 bond projects, or should we table that until the next? Because we still.
I think this one can be pretty quick too. It's pretty self-explanatory. These are projects we get every 2 years, from the money we get every 2 years from the county for our capital work. And so these are the projects that have been identified for those next 2 years. A lot of these are summer type projects that take place, kind of big projects. And so you can surely take a look at them. If you got questions about them, we can answer them anytime. But I think they're pretty self-explanatory as we move forward. As a part of our plan.
Okay. And I guess my question would be, have these been vetted, in recent times? I know when this was put together, we're talking about, 10 years ago, the kind of
Yeah.
So how recently have they been vetted to know what truly is merited? And of course, without that facilities audit yet, I know makes that more difficult.
Yeah.
And then my other question is have these been vetted through an equity lens?
So the process for this is, even though we have a plan, Barry Monsinger's here, Barry meets with all the trade and maintenance and discusses what's on this list and what needs to be a priority on the list and what's not. So these are priority projects that are out there that everybody within the department feels are great need to have to move forward. And so, and I'll tell you, one of the things that items on there that we added that was not on our original list was some ADA at the downtown school. You'll see that item on there. We got a child there this year with a wheelchair. We need to do some additional ADA work there. So I didn't mean to try to cut you off early, but I kind of need to move this forward because we have to send this to the county for approval to be able to get this project going in the near future.
Any other questions about the 2/3 bond? All right, let's move to our action items. The first one is for the foreclosed Ashley properties. Do you have a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, that one passes. The next one is consider approval of the 22-24 2/3 bonds. Is there a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Great. The next one is the approval of JFK change order number 1. What is that?
It's the sewer
The sewer.
problem where they found they have to replace the whole sewer line.
Okay,
Move approval.
thank you. Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Motion carries. The next one is the approval of acquiring a bus stop shelter easement at East Forsyth High School, 2500 West Mountain Street. Is there a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? I do have discussion about this. How many of our high schools have bus stops? I'm just trying to figure out how many, why is it there? Who's it carrying? How many
Yeah.
students, or is it staff that's using it?
Yeah, Main Street Academy has one as well. And we came to you a while back because this is really the city building these shelter for the public.
Right.
They use it, so you have public and students mainly that use this bus stop.
But it's on the campus.
Yeah, it's right behind the baseball field there on Wilhelm Drive.
So how many students and staff use this bus stop?
I don't know if I have the exact numbers, but I don't think they're really high. But it must be enough now if they want to put a shelter in to protect people from the weather, so.
Right.
But I don't think it's a big.
I guess my question is this an advantage for this school and there should be bus stops in other schools? Because the students are using it, it means that they're not using their own transportation, or they're not using school bus transportation. So
I will just tell you, I see people, so that's the last drop as far out as the city, Winston-Salem Transit goes toward Kernersville. It used to be that the park bus would like fill in some of that, but there's no public transportation in Kernersville. So the people that I see there, when you see them walking to their job. So I don't see, and the whole time that I was there dropping off my son before he started driving, it was really before you go into the gate. It's right there on that area. And you would see adults there in their uniform, and some of them were walking to the plant that's right, what's the name of it?
Yeah, right across the street.
Right across the street. I did not see like students or people that looked like they were our staff. I really saw just like the general public, which is also brought up like a little bit of a safety issue because that's right there on the campus.
Yeah, I don't think we have a handful of
I
students.
just think we need to look and see who's using it for our students and staff, and is that something that's benefiting the school, which is great, but is it something we should be considering for all of our schools to have that benefit of having city transportation? And if the school is using it to get students from out of zone and having city transportation get them to school, then that's an advantage that school has, especially if those are student athletes. So that's something I think that needs to be looked into.
The good news is every student at every school is officially there, whether it was through choice, residential. So if it is public transportation they're using, that's great. That's a great benefit.
I
It is a
agree.
great benefit.
But every school should have that opportunity if they're recruiting students from out of zone, that they then also have public transportation to get them there.
That's a whole other conversation, but
Well,
I
and
will say.
that's why
Yeah.
I feel like as a board, we should be addressing that because it is a fairness issue, which tends to be equity issues, so.
I guess, given that we're having to get rid of so many projects and we're trying to figure out how to pay for East Forsyth High School and Philo, I would not make shelters at all the schools as a top priority. It does sound like this is a good thing for people who live in Kernersville. It sounds like it may be useful for some of our students. And part of it sounds like also being good neighbors.
And I think every school should have that opportunity as well.
Well, and I understand, and it's just that if we had the funds to fund every opportunity that we would like our children to have everywhere, then it would be a totally different universe. So I agree that it would be nice if we had funds for things like that, but I think we are struggling so hard to meet some of the needs of things we've already promised everyone.
So,
We're not paying for that, are we? I mean,
This is not something the district's paying
yeah,
for.
so that's,
so,
But if the city pays for it and then you start believing, well, then that makes us required to make sure that all schools have equal facilities.
I'm looking at the 30,000 feet up question of, if this is an asset at this school, why do we not have this asset at other schools?
Well, you can move
Because
it,
it's,
you can move it, 200 feet off of the school and set it on the side of the road. And it wouldn't have anything to do with the school. I think it's not so much, and if it was sitting off the campus and a student still chose to use it and walk, I think this particular thing, again, seeing it, I'm sure there are students that use it, I'm sure there are staff that use it, but I remember several years ago, because of cuts, they canceled this bus line, like they stopped it, Daryl, didn't they stop it? And I remember employers somehow thought the school district stopped it because of where it was, came and said, please, my employees, they ride there and then they walk. And so the city put it back on the map, but it wasn't because of the school, it was because of employment.
just a quick point of order, so the question's been called, I want us to be mindful of the time, thank you.
Did you? Oh, quickly, I just wanted to say that the school districts of comparable size in the state, as they plan to also extend magnet, working with city transportation is a part of that plan. So I forgot to share that. I was on a call about that. So I think we do need to extend that asset to work with the city to create transportation opportunities to increase magnet options.
Okay, with no more discussion, all those in favor, raise your hand. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. The last item to consider is the Duke Energy easement for Southwest Elementary. That's right, Southwest School Road. Thank you. Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Okay, our next meeting will be Tuesday, October 11th for Buildings and Grounds. Thank you.
All right, I would like to call to order the policy committee. I would like to remind everyone of the members of the committee, and those are myself, Board Member Colleen Jones, Board Member Woodbury, Board Member Motzinger, and Board Member Crowley. Our first discussion item is AR 3542.1, language update on voucher meals with our Chief Operations Officer, Lauren Richards.
Good evening. So this AR has not been updated since July of 1995. And we know that since our schools closed down for COVID, the USDA approved meals to be free for all students. When we came back this fall for school, the USDA reverted their regulations back to pre-COVID times. And so students, we still have CEP schools where our students eat meals for free. And then in all of our other schools, students are qualified for free or reduced meals based on income eligibility applications. And so in looking at this AR, we knew that we immediately needed to make some revisions. And so what staff has been doing for the last week or so is going through that AR, removing language about the voucher meal that we used to provide students when they did not have money to purchase or pay for a meal. We have messaged out to all of our principals that we will not be doing the voucher meal this year. That process is not going to be put in place. If a child needs access to a meal and comes to the serving line, we are going to provide that meal and charge that child's account. So we've gone ahead and messaged that so that we do not have any issues with a child being provided that voucher meal. And so we have completed those revisions. We are submitting those revisions to our legal teams of that and also to DPI. Because the USDA does require the school meal programs to have a policy or an administrative regulation addressing what happens when a child does charge a meal. I'll turn it over to you for questions.
Only comment is I'm so glad to see this change.
You are not alone. There are many.
As a person who used to get a voucher meal a little bit when I would forget my lunch money, it was like a piece of bread and a vegetable. And so
That's terrible.
it's really good to hear that we're not doing that.
Yes.
So it'll make your children very happy whenever you forget to give them lunch money.
That is correct. So we'll be monitoring the meal balances. I provided Dr. Pratt kind of a list the other day of where we are. We'll be working with the schools and with our families to keep up with that every week.
Our next discussion item is policy 5131.5, procedures for student discipline with Dr. Effie.
Good afternoon, board, Chair Bowman and other board members and our superintendent. And so I'm here before you. There's actually two policies that are going to come forward, so I'll follow right behind this one. So policy 5131.5, actually you approved updates to it October of last year when there was improvements and changes to the hearing process. But now we're bringing this policy and the next one forward for greater alignment to the revised code of character, conduct, and support. So they're really not substantial changes that you will see, but I will just walk you through some of those. So I know you've had the opportunity to read it, but just some of the highlights of where there are changes beyond grammatical or structure formatting. It's on page 2 at the very bottom of the page around notice to parents. So we just wanted to make it clear and concise that parents are communicated with anytime there is in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension. If you look at the top of page 3 where it continues, there's an asterisk there that includes students with disabilities or students with a 504. So we wanted to intentionally call out if there's a student who is identified or 504, there is notification to the case manager, someone to their support there. At the bottom of page 3, it's just more, again, aligning language to the code. In the code, it talks about long-term suspension, alternative school assignments, and expulsion. And then we have defined long-term suspension in the same manner in which it was defined in the code. If you flip over, how we're looking at scrolling the next page down near the bottom on page 4, we added the right of the student, parent, or the student's representative, just to make sure we included all parties in accordance with the general statute and those who can be present, and support the student when they're going through the hearing process. Excuse my scratchy voice, it's just starting up today. I think the last major change on this one is on page 10, which is the page right before, thank you, Kevin, under request for readmission of expelled students, where it says 4D. It's just adding clarification to the process. So we included the recommendation of the principal for the school where the child is requesting to be admitted to. So we wanted to make sure that was clearly outlined in the policy. Are there any questions about the changes?
So I have one question. It's related a little bit. Is ALC, do you know if ALC is still a practice within the district? Are we still doing ALC?
So currently for this year, and we did not include it in the code. So we do have in-school suspension in several of our schools. In-school suspension and ALC were one and the same. However, there were in some places where a student might be assigned to ALC and it might be a placement of 45 to 90 days. And so that is a change in assignment. And so we're not moving forward with that practice this year, but we do want to, as a district, in support of our principals and when their behaviors that come up from students that they've expressed, to look at models or structures that if a student, instead of giving an out of school suspension for a long period of time or possibly reassignment, that we look for a practice or a structure that is fair, is not so long-standing. The struggle that most leaders had with that practice was that the students being removed from their classroom for so long, even though they were on school premises, the limited access to core instruction that they would be getting in class. And if they were a student with disability, we were also concerned that they may not be receiving the full scope of the services that they are required based on their IEP to receive.
Thank you. I share those concerns. So I'm glad you all are looking at it.
Thank you.
I had one other question about expulsions.
Yes,
Is attending school virtual academy an option for students who would otherwise be expelled?
So in our code, we did, I think, if I remember correctly, we're all processing all the information in there together. But I want to say in the code, we also addressed that that might be an option versus actually expelling a student from a class. But based on data that we pulled, there's been very few instances where a kid has actually been expelled. So it wasn't a high number.
Right, I would prefer to have our policies not have us expelling students, but that they are always given an option to continue their education. And even if it's a small number, and even if it's, I feel very strongly that I don't want our district to ever be the reason why a child is removed from the chance to get an education. And certainly there are children who it's not safe for themselves or others for them to be in the building. And I understand that, but I would really like us to not expel.
I'm glad Ms. Jenkins came up here because I'm sure she would be able to answer whether there's something in general statutes or something that actually speaks to expulsions and why we have it in our policy.
Well, and we turn down people from virtual academy, so that it's not that we offer virtual academy and there's always space there and any kid who's gotten expelled can just jump into that. I don't think that's a realistic expectation. So then we would have to expel.
So Ms. Singer, you're right in that there are certain offenses where a student's presence on campus would pose a threat to the safety of others. And so expulsion may be an appropriate consequence. However, by law, we are always required to offer alternative educational services to students if it's feasible to do so, even during their period of expulsion. I also wanted to also clarify that even for students who are expelled or long-term suspended for 365, after 180 days, they can apply to be readmitted. And that would come to the board to determine whether or not that student continues to pose a threat to the safety of other students. And if the determination is no, they can be readmitted after 6 months.
I guess I would just really like what, I believe a lot in what's in writing, as you know. And so I would like us to have policies that say clearly that that if we are going to offer all students an alternative form of education, that we say so, and that we make sure that happens. Because again, I've expelled students very often never return to school. And it's a tragedy for the rest of their lives that they have never graduated. And I'd just like to make sure that we're saying we will find a way, or we will offer you this alternative. We don't have to say we'll do whatever it takes to make sure you stay in, but I would like it to say we will offer you an alternative that allows you to continue your education.
And Ms. Monson, I do believe that is in 5131.
Okay.
You normally have to pull policies off my head, but I'm pretty sure that it's in 5130.
Okay, I just would, again,
Yeah.
I just
And
think
we-
if we can
yeah.
have consistent language everywhere.
And we do have it included in the code as well, so in that section, it also
Right.
speaks as a consequence of alternative placement.
Right, so even if we just put in a little phrase that says, if a child chooses expulsion over the alternative offered, I just want us to be consistent in everything that we as a district do not want to be the cause for a child to not finish their education.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Are there any other questions about 5131.5? Okay, perfect. Thank you for cross-checking, Ms. Crowley. If you don't see it, let me know. Okay, so let's move on to 5131.6. Again, with my opening, this is more about alignment to our current code, character, conduct, and support. You'll notice that it was last updated on August 2013. So while there are a lot of sections where it's more grammatical or formatting that have been improved, I will point out a few places where there were some changes made. So on page 2, I guess I can scroll here, under B, it was included any tobacco, CBD, or Delta products, intentionally calling those controlled substances out, have been included, as well as number 6, any controlled substances. And then if you look over on page 5, this is where the most significant changes have been made. This aligns with our behavior matrix under our section on disciplinary action and our previous AR policy 5131.6, not 0.6, 5131 AR. If you recall, there were 8 levels to consequences, and our revised code is 6 levels of consequences. So in this chart, we wanted to align the level of consequence to what's current in the code. So that's where you'll see those strike-throughs and just the change in level for what that accountable consequence would be. If you would look, so that's through that section. You'll look under section 8. Trying to make sure I'm looking. I'm sorry, section 9, under drug testing of students. Specifically under, next to letter B, random testing of students participating in extracurricular activities. At the request member, under number 1, it says, if you look at line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 7th line, in addition, the use of abusive alcohol and or illegal drugs by these athletes is likely to increase student injuries. So changing athletes to students, because it's for any student who is participating in an extracurricular activity and not just relegated to athletes or athletics. So even though you don't see that change here, based on that feedback, if it's approved to go for public comment, that change will be included so that the public can see those changes. Those are the only real changes in policy 5131.6. Are there any questions?
I have a question, but I don't know what page it's on, so I'm looking at a PDF. It's the one with the chart on it.
Yes. The discipline response, I think.
Under possession. So this is probably the possession of a narcotic or controlled substance. And I see Ritalin as one of the possible drugs at the right there. Yeah. Though this is for students, a student being in possession just by itself, not because students can have prescriptions for Ritalin and that be something that they keep on their person. So how do we kind of account? What is the process?
Fiona, do you want to speak to that?
So under another board policy that we have under our student wellness policy, there are procedures for how medications are supposed to be maintained at the school. And so they're supposed to be kept in a more secure, with the exception of certain like over-the-counter medications and things like that, kept in a secure location at the school, and a student come up pursuant to their designated time to take the medication. Okay. And so because of that medicine as well as other medications, that's the reason why it's supposed to be in a more secure setting.
Okay, and that expectation is the same through primary and secondary, so high school students are expected to keep those same?
For these more serious with the substances in these medications, yes. But for high school students, there is, I believe, an exception in our student wellness policy to allow them to carry like a certain over-the-counter medication like Tylenol, things like that, but that does not exist at elementary level.
Right. Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a question about getting on the radar for this. And this is a situation that I hear happens a lot, where a student comes in smelling like a certain drug, and then they're being searched or held because, you know, their clothes smell like it or their hair smells like it. And this concerns me because there are students who, you know, are around people either in where their home is or where they wait for the bus or whatever, who might be doing these. And then I feel like these students are being unfairly identified and held. I don't see where any of that's addressed, like what, you know, I see where it talks about, you know, having paraphernalia and that kind of thing, but the truth is that there's a lot of kids who aren't passing the sniff test, and I don't see how that's being addressed.
So I can't comment on like the actual practice of all the different schools, but what I can say is that the decision to search a student should be based on reasonable suspicion. So that student may be in violation of law or policy. And then under reasonable suspicion, you have to look at the totality of the circumstances. That could include an odor, a strong odor of a substance, or it could include their, you know, their affect, bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, statements from other people that the student may have been seen smoking or consuming whatever the substance is in order to make a decision whether or not there's reasonable suspicion to actually search a student. You know, I do agree that there are often reasons and causes for assent to be on a student that may not necessarily equate to the student using or possessing that drug. And so the administrators are to kind of use the totality of the circumstances and making that call on whether or not to subject the student to a reasonable suspicion search.
And can the student, they could request to be tested, could they not, if the search didn't bring anything, but they still thought they had reasonable, you know, reason to suspect the child can request to be tested, correct?
The child could request to be tested, or the administrator could request the child to be tested. That requires parental consent if the school is requesting it. The parent can refuse, and in that case, the administrator would need to make a decision based on the other information that they have available to them. The thing about being tested is that it is an off-campus location, so there's a little bit of a process for that. But
we would not deny a child who said, I haven't been smoking, you know, with somebody at home or whatever, I want to be tested. We wouldn't deny that, correct?
No, I don't see why we would do that.
Any additional questions? Okay. Thank you, Dr. McMillan.
Thank you so much.
We are going to move on to our action items now. The first is to consider approval of to post policy 5131.5 for public comment. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous.
No.
It is not unanimous. Any opposed? Thank you. Next, consider approval to post policy 5131.6 for public comment.
Move to approve. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? All right, those vote passed. Our announcements, our next meeting will be Tuesday, October 11th, 2022. And with that, I will adjourn the policy committee.
Thank you. I would like to call the meeting to order. May I have a motion to go into closed session to discuss a personnel matter? Second. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.